So hello everyone and welcome to this video which is about the different kind of SAP issues that you face and the common root causes for the same. So at the outset I would like to mention that there are some assumptions that we would have to make, that you first of all are an SAP consultant or are an SAP user who understands some or most of the terminologies that we will use here. It is expected that you know the software development life cycle, basically requirements gathering until the post go live support. But yes, it doesn't always have to be a waterfall model that a project works on. Nowadays, agile is the methodology that is more prominent. But in both cases, although these phases might not be uh, differentiated, but the frequency might be a bit more, but you will have the different phases or testing phases that have been mentioned here. Now, this table is primarily designed so that you get a quick snapshot of what are the different issues, which teams get involved, and what is the possible remedy. So this remedy is of course a long-term remedy. An immediate resolution will of course be that you will need to make the necessary change or resolve the error, change the custom logic, or release the transport, so on and so forth. But from a long-term perspective, what is the right thing to do is what is the possible remedy column for. Let's jump right in. The first kind of issue, if you are from a functional SAP functional background or a functional or an SAP user, you may have heard about configuration issue. So this, for people who are from the functional background, is typically something that you do in the SPRO or the IMG transaction, and you will mostly identify these issues right at the start during the unit test if you have tested it right, or in the system integration test, user acceptance test, or of course during go live when the load is maximum. Of course, as we were discussing with agile method, you don't have a specific go live. You might be releasing changes into the production system more frequently, and sometimes that's where you will also have an advantage, because you are releasing small packets, you can test it better. So always focus on the testing bit. Configuration, as you might already understand, is more functional relevant. Which team is this more relevant for? Development sometimes, because there may be configurations that also involve development. For example, pricing routines in a pricing procedure will involve both code as well as configuration. It is rarely basis or security relevant. What are the possible remedies? Clear requirements, including non-generic occasional variants. Now, these variants typically mean there are specific regions or customers or processes that are not often used, but when they are, and if they are not tested, you may encounter issues. System walkthrough for solution. Understand that this may not be possible every time, but if you are able to share screen with the user, and if the user sometimes is able to tell you on the screen what is required, which may not be possible because they might not be from the SAP background. Some who have used ECC may be able to be more specific with their requirements. So walkthrough always helps. Strong internal alignment with unit test and system integration test. It's important that different scenarios are tested. Negative testing is done. It's an underrated gem. It helps you resolve a lot of issues far in advance. So the next is difference in understanding, self-explanatory kind of issue, and this can go with any or every other issue that's mentioned here. A master data issue might end up being a difference in understanding. A configuration issue might end up being a difference in understanding. So this can occur in all phases, right from requirements up to post go live. Now, since blueprinting is typically carried out by the functional folks, hence this is mostly functional relevant. Doesn't mean that a difference in understanding cannot happen in the other teams, and that's why you see that in development, basis, and security, it's also mentioned that this can happen sometimes. For example, a role is assumed for one duty, one role, but the customer has also assumed that you will have a display and a change role differently created. So it's important to discuss and try and put things in the document, but I would say after discussion. It's no use that you just put it in the document. That's why in the possible remedy you see that it's less assumptions, more communication. Communicate things that you feel may be gray areas. It's very important. It can avoid a lot of back and forth and save a lot of time and effort for you as well as the client or the customer. Appropriate or detailed user training. A lot of times the users are responsible for 7, 8, 9 steps, but they are only shown or they're only trained for steps 1, 2, and 3. And that can cause a little bit of a gap. But user training, I can understand, may not always lie with the consultant. But if you happen to be part of the user training plan, do suggest that the users try out the different scenarios that they specially use in their daily tasks and for specific regions as well. Okay, so the next issue is master data issue. Now this can be different kinds of issue: master data unavailable, master data missing, specific master data not available, like we were discussing, for specific region was not considered, a specific document type was not considered, and so on and so forth. Again, this you will find out typically when the user starts to test. Again, also during go live in production, occasionally during system integration test, where a master data works for one module and doesn't for the other. For example, material might work fine for sales but is not working fine for finance. There may be some setting or some data that is missing. So this can be again functional or development relevant. Development, there might be custom fields and so on, but everything finally, if it is related to a master like customer material master, then it sits in the master. Basis and security are almost not directly involved in master data unless some access to some master data transaction is unavailable, and hence it's almost never. So possible remedy, as you are seeing, it's mock loads followed up with scenario testing. Mock loads happen for lower landscapes. You have lower volume of data. When you go to the higher landscapes, quality, pre-production, you have higher volume of data. It is also important that you test different scenarios in these systems, because it's only after that you get to know whether sometimes the master data is there but it's not really usable. That can happen as well. The next issue is SAP standard bug. Now this is something that can happen in different phases, typically in system integration test or user acceptance test, or during go live this is found out. Unit test is usually done with dummy data, and hence it might pass off, but when you actually run the proper SAP process, you might face issues if some note is not available or is only available in the next update. Then you might have to go and check for those notes. Now mostly this is functional relevant, because this will typically hit a functional process. Sometimes it can be development relevant as well, where the table or the structures need some update and it is not currently available in the system. It is rarely basis and security. so SAP standard, but it can be, because there can be a possibility that a transport program that's supposed to release a transport from one system to another has a bug, and maybe the basis team will have to go and check and find out. So the remedy in the long term is that you research the project scenarios as far as possible for specific OSS notes in advance. Is this always possible to avoid every time? No, may not be, but you can save a lot of time with the most relevant notes, especially for your process. For example, it might be a credit management process, or it might be a billing document process, or so on and so forth. One thing here is you will need an S user ID. Typically for every project there is one or two S user IDs that are created to communicate with SAP, to create tickets, to get some resolution from their side, or even to raise queries to SAP. So S user IDs need to be created. I've also noticed that some organizations also, for their resources, allows S user ID creation, especially if your organization is an SAP partner. They should have this facility. You can check within your organization. The next issue is a custom logic issue. This is a bit straightforward because this is mostly custom code that your developer and you in conjunction have together created. Of course, the developer would know more because it is more of a code. So this should be revealed during the unit test or system integration test, user acceptance test, go live. This again can be a mix of custom logic and difference in understanding, custom logic and configuration issue, etc. And that's why you see that there are different teams involved, like functional is also involved, development of course, because it can be it is mostly a code related issue, but as we are discussing, it can sometimes be an unclear requirement as well. Generally not basis or security issue, unless you have some custom rules or custom authorization objects, etc. Possible remedy, a little similar to the configuration issue. You need clear requirements including non-generic and occasional variants. Strong peer review with negative testing. We already discussed the negative testing, and it's always advisable that somebody else from your team tests your code or program, because typically for us our code is the best and will work in all scenarios, but when somebody else tests it, things get revealed. Strong internal alignment with unit test and system integration test. Again, ensure that we are testing with at least 2-3 different types of data, so that you are able to catch issues within the team and you don't have to do a back and forth with the client or customer and try and explain them why this happened or why that happened. Transport request issue, again, something, if you have been a consultant for some time, you understand there are transport requests that are missed to be released from either development to quality or quality to production, or the dependency is not tracked. This can be revealed during user acceptance test, go live, post go live support, even during system integration test, I would say sometimes, where the transport request is missing or has failed and nobody really checked it. So this can be functional relevant, development relevant, basis security, all because transport request is required for any kind of change that you have to do in the system. You have to do it and save it in a transport request and send it to the higher landscape. Possible remedy from a long-term standpoint is planned release process with checks and approvals. All the necessary stakeholders need to be informed, and necessary approvals need to be taken in advance so that there are no surprises that your change has started affecting some other module. Dependency checks, very important. If your transport request is dependent on some other transport, it needs to be maintained. There are a lot of tools even within the system that SAP sometimes offers, so that those can be employed and used. SIT, UAT to be done including negative tests, so that if your transport is unavailable, to be honest, even a normal test, even a system integration test will not work. So tests need to be performed well so that you are not faced with a transport request issue. Authorization issue, again, looks pretty straightforward, um, but sometimes you will feel that the authorization is all right because one module is able to work fine, but when it gets into the other module, there are issues. So, for instance, during SDFI integration, the billing document was created successfully, but the accounting document has failed because the relevant role is not available for that particular user. So this will typically be revealed in the system integration test or user acceptance test or during go live, right? Again, coming back to my point, this is something that will also be revealed during the agile method whenever the user tests it or whenever you push things to production. Authorization issue can be functional relevant because typically functional people are the ones that sit with the users and discuss what are the different types of people that are going to use the system. Highly recommend that when roles are being discussed, there is one senior security person involved because they are well aware of these kind of scenarios that come back, because typically when a system goes live, the first kind of tickets that you get is that I'm unable to access, unable to log in, unable to run this transaction code. And yes, this should not happen if the testing is done well, and that is what you will find in the possible remedy. So it's either functional or security. Those are the most I mean, mostly these will be the teams that will be responsible if there is some issue like this, typically not development and basis. So the possible remedy is that you do a strong testing in UAT for the different roles. Try to execute transaction codes that you will be using daily as a user. Highly recommended. Clear communication and documentation with segregation of duties of roles. So this needs to be discussed in advance if there is a separate display transaction required. For instance, an SD person would like to see the FI document. They wouldn't be doing any changes there, but they would like to display. The last issue that we have here is the communication integration issue. Typically something that happens when you are dealing with third party. There is data that is going in and out of SAP. If you have heard of iDocs or proxies, this is something that you will find, or BAPIs that get used, RFCs, etc. Usually revealed in the user acceptance test, go live, post go live support. This can be a functional issue, can be a development issue, basis issue for sure, because RFCs, if they are not set correctly, then things might not work fine. Security as well sometimes, because the RFC is all good, the user is all created, but the user does not have the specific role to perform a specific change. So you might encounter failure. Again, the possible remedy is strong testing in UAT, clear protocols for downtime during updates and upgrades, and post unlock tests. A lot of times after updates and upgrades, users are unlocked, but I'm not sure if all the users are unlocked. So there might be some RFC user, some batch user, etc. Typically experienced teams do not have issues with this integration after an update or upgrade, but there can be issues, and this is something that needs to be taken care of. So post unlock basic sanity check, basic test would really help. One point that is not mentioned here is that SAP being a packaged application, there is a possibility that there is an issue, that a reported issue is actually a limitation of SAP, and it is something that cannot be done in SAP unless you have to customize. You might have to create a separate custom process or create a separate custom transaction code to run a process in a specific way, because SAP is designed in a specific manner, because there's a lot of code, lot of tables that get updated in the background, and processes typically need to follow a format, and if you have a very complex format, SAP may not work. So it might not work in SAP and it might require a customization, or it might be too complex for the user to do it. So there are limitations to SAP, and typically senior consultants should be able to point this out if there are scenarios that exist like that. Okay, hope this was helpful. This added some value to you. Most things you must be aware of, but hopefully this is something that can be used as a guideline, and the project can work fine once you take care of most of the remedies that we just discussed. So yeah, thank you and see you in the next video.